Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be back with you after some time since my last 4 seasons. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Bruce Black. I'm the horticulture educator for Carroll Lee Whiteside, Boone, DeKalb, Ogle counties, which is the northwest corner of Illinois. So I'm happy to be with you guys to talk about Veggie Visions today. And we are going to talk a little bit about growing zones and just review our growing climate for Illinois. Talk a little bit about planting times for Illinois because those are going to depend on where you are and when you can start. I know all of us gardeners have already gotten the itch to start planting, and if we haven't, we will as soon as we can. Then we're going to talk about those new cultivars for this year. I'm also going to talk about the new veggies that came out last year. And this will not be an all-encompassing list, just so everybody knows, but it's going to be a place to start, a place to do some of that initial investigating, do that initial research. Um, then we're going to wrap up with some planting tips for our vegetables throughout the growing season, and then do a little review. All right. So, as everybody knows, or most of everybody who is joining us today, we are in the state of Illinois. So, for those that don't know where I'm at, I'm currently coming from Sterling, which is right here in Whiteside County. Um, so when we look at the growing climate or the growing degree days for Illinois, it's going to depend on where you are. So, um, our friends down in the southern third of Illinois have the longest growing season in Illinois, compared to those of us up in the north. So we split the state roughly into three growing zones. So we've got the north, we've got the central, and then we've got the southern. And for about every 250 miles you go south in Illinois, you're going to add roughly a week in the spring and a week in the fall to your growing season. So by the time we get down to the southern third part of the state, um, we are getting roughly an extra month compared to those of us up here in the north. So usually we range from about 150 days to 180 days that we can grow here in Illinois. So on the screen here, we have the map from our state climatologist, Trent Ford, and this shows us roughly when we can expect that last spring freeze, which is our 32-degree freeze, here in Illinois. So as we can see, there is roughly a month's difference from tip to tip, from April 20th to May 20th. So those of us up here in the north, you can see we get a little bit less of that growing time. And then one thing people always ask right here with some of our collar counties around Chicago and Cook County is why do they get an extra couple of days? And that's just because of their microclimate for their environment. So they're a little bit more protected from some of those late spring freezes. Um, so a good rule of thumb for Illinois, um, at least up in my counties up here, we say Mother's Day, which was actually just this past weekend. So Mother's Day week to about Halloween is when we expect usually our last degree frost. Now, with the updated map here from Trent, we're seeing that the month of November is really our last freeze over the last 30-ish years. So November 8th is up at the top. A majority of the state about 3 days later for November 11th. And then as we go to the south, we're looking at about Thanksgiving down there. So, if we have any new gardeners in our audience today, you might be wondering, well, why does this matter? Illinois, we have great soils, we have great weather. We usually are able to just put things in the ground and grow them. Well, we're looking at our frost sensitivities and our freeze sensitivities because each of our vegetables has a specific range of temperature that they like to be planted in or they like to grow in. So I relate this to just like humans. Everybody has their preferred temperature. Everybody has their preferred environment. For me, myself, I would rather have a colder day rather than a hotter day. But I know that is not always the case for everybody. So when we look at our vegetables, we have timings that we can plant our groups of vegetables in. So this list right here is the very hardy group. So these are the ones that most of everybody, including those of us in Northern Illinois, have already planted. About 2 weeks ago would have been the last date to get some of these in. So the mid-March to late April, these are the ones that we plant about 4 to 6 weeks before that frost date. And so when we look at the list here, we see a lot of root crops. So potatoes, rutabagas, salsify, turnips. Um, then we've also got things in the brassica family. So the kale, the broccoli, the kohlrabi, um, our mustard greens. Those are things that we plant already because they prefer these colder temperatures. They do better in these colder temperatures. What is great about these vegetables is we can then save some of our seed now, or it's still not too late to buy more seed if anybody needs a reason to buy more plants right now. You can buy some of those seeds, save them for mid-July through early September and plant them, and then you will have a um, succession crop of these cooler vegetables as the temperature cools down in the fall and have a fall crop. Now, a couple of these that are on here are perennial. So they're things that come up year after year. So asparagus, most people would have that already planted in their yard. And of course, this would be coming up. Um, but then garlic is one that we have to plan a little bit ahead for. So this is one that we would plant in the fall, and then we would start harvesting it in spring and through summer. All right. Our next group likes it a little bit warmer. And so these are our frost tolerant ones. These are the ones that we would plant late March through the end of the month, end of May. And these are our beets, carrots, cauliflower, Chinese cabbage, and Swiss chard. So some of those leafy greens, they're a little bit more tender. They like the temperatures of the soil just a little bit warmer, so that they're above 40 degrees. Um, I know up here in the north, our soil temperatures are a little bit above that right now. So these could still go in now. And one thing that most people might be wondering with the cauliflower, because cauliflower is in the brassica family, but it does not have the cold tolerance like the rest of its cousins in the brassica family. So that's just one thing to point out, that not all plant families like it the same. Not all plant families or plants in a plant family have the same growing conditions. So just because we think we're planting Nebraska, we need to have that research in mind for, should I plant it or should I wait? Our next group of vegetables is going to be our tender vegetables, and these are the ones that we can be planting now again. As soil temperatures get to 50 to 60 degrees, we're looking at planting these on or near the frost date. So in northern Illinois, I said our frost date is usually Mother's Day weekend, which was just this past Sunday. So this week is the week that we can start putting these out, looking at the forecast dependent. So our snap beans, sweet corn, tomatoes, and then New Zealand spinach can also be going in this year. One thing to mention with sweet corn is if you are going to be planting super sweet corn, um, which is the SH2 super sweet corn, that actually needs soil temperatures closer to 65 degrees. So that one is going to have to wait until that soil temperature gets up just a few more degrees, which is usually um, possibly into early June, depending on where you are at in the state. When we say temperatures above 60 degrees, this usually is about 2 weeks after your frost-free date. So then we can start planting the rest of the crops, and these are the heat lovers. So I always tell my master gardeners, the more miserable that we tend to be outside, these are the ones that tend to be thriving outside. So lima beans, cucumbers, eggplants, the members of the Cucurbitaceae family, which is our squash and our gourds, our muskmelons, pumpkins and watermelon, and then our sweet potatoes and okra. Um, so just a little side note here, we're growing okra in the college greenhouse that I manage, and um, last week we had some really warm days and okra really popped. So while other things in the greenhouse were not doing as favorably and needed to be watered a little bit more heavily, that okra really did show that it is a heat lover. All right. So, to start our conversation on the new vegetables for this year, um, the one thing a lot of people who have been with Four Seasons for a while know, or if you remember our Gardener's Corner newsletter that we always used to do, I would always write about All America Selections or AAS. And All America Selections is an independent nonprofit organization that tests new, never before sold varieties for the home gardener. So, after a full season of anonymous trialing by volunteer horticulture professionals, only the top garden performers are given the awards of AAS winner. And this designation is solely for their superior performance in the garden as compared to the most relatable market or the most relatable cultivars that are already on the market. So the reason why I always tell people to start looking for new vegetables with All America Selections is because All America Selections was started in the 1930s. And so before, I'm just going to give you a little bit of history here. Before All America Selections in the 1920s and the 1930s, consumer magazine editors knew little about new garden varieties and had very few resources to obtain reliable information. So as a result, articles often tended to be misleading and incorrect. So the garden club movement was in its infancy and needed some materials. So home gardens, farm seeds, and florist magazines were all hungry for garden news. Well, in 1932, a gentleman named W. Ray Hastings, um, was president of the Southern Seedmen's Association in Atlanta, and he proposed the idea for All-America selections as a way for home gardeners to learn which varieties had really truly been improved in a non-biased way. So in 1932, All-America Selections was founded, and the first All-America Selection winners were announced a year later in 1933. So the reason why I tell a lot of our new gardeners or even our seasoned gardeners to look at All-America Selections is because this has 30, well, almost 100 years worth of data since 1933 of trialed um, varieties and crops that are available in the United States and Canada. And so this has a database online at All America Selections where you can go and look at all of these vegetables. And see what varieties would do best in your yard under your conditions that have been tested, tried, and trued for all of the past almost 100 years. And so we are going to start off today talking about the new vegetable winners for All America selections, which are suitable for Illinois. Um, there are additional plants that were given All-America Selection winners for this year. They are flowers, so I did not include them in today's presentation, but they are available if you want to check them out. So the first one is Basil Treviso, and this is a edible All-America Selections winner. And this All-America Selection Basil winner was an outstanding choice for any kitchen garden, boasting its tight, compact, and highly branched habit, making it perfect for containers. Not only is it said to have the delicious basil flavor that we want. But when it was tested by the horticulturist, it had a slight anise flavor to its leaves, but it also stayed tender longer, tending to resist the bitterness that basil can get after harvest, while maintaining excellent leaf quality for later in the season. The All-America Selections judges noted that it had good vigor, heat tolerance, and that it was notably slower to flower compared to other known varieties. The bright green foliage was said to resist oxidation, making it an ideal cultivar for its high performing selection, superior, fresh tasting throughout the season. So I will tell you guys that with these being 2026 varieties, they are just on the market this year. I have not had a chance to grow them personally, but they are on my list of things to grow as they are available. For the habit of this basil, it is a mounding habit for a basil. Gets roughly 18 inches tall and 24 inches wide. Described as a sweet basil with green foliage, has disease resistance and tolerances to downy mildew, powdery mildew. Um, and then it was noted that if you start the seeds from transplant, it takes about 30 or excuse me, 60 days, and then 90 days germination from direct sowing. With roughly the basil seeds starting to open in about 10 to 14 days after planting. All right. So our next variety is a pole bean called Majesty, and it is a purple variety. And while I'm saying that, I'm thinking of Purple Mountain Majesty, might be where they got this name. But this is also a 2026 editable winner. And it was described as an outstanding purple pole bean, delivering high yield, superior quality, and a rugged performance. Um, these plants maintain a dense dark green foliage that had notable resistance to insect damage and excellent recovery from the summer heat. The pods were reported to be straight and uniform, as you can see in the picture there, making them easy to harvest due to their contrast to their leaves. Um, For flavor, according to the judges, they were sweet flavored and tender with a non-bitter texture. It's an early maturing variety um, that was suggested to be great for vertical gardening, that it would continue to have a harvest all year long. These were container suitable. They have a climbing habit that requires staking, with them reaching about 6 feet long and having a spread of about 12 inches. Um, for the days to harvest from seed was about 55 to 60 days. And you'd get about 15 to 25 of the purple beans per plant. Um, For planting, the seeds should be about 3 inches apart within the row and 36 inches between the row. They recommend a 5 to 6 foot trellis. And if you are putting them in a container, to put them next to a fence to allow them to climb, or have a stake available. Um, a note here for greater yields: trim any of the growth above the top of the trellis or the fence to promote a fuller, more robust pod set. Our next one is a hybrid, and this was a All-America Selections edible winner as well. And this is a kale called Ruby Boer. And this was a dual purpose kale, as it was awarded the gold medal award for both its ornamental and its vegetable trials, which is the first occurrence that this has happened in the All-America Selections trials, that one plant won a gold medal for both ornamental and vegetable trials. Delivered beauty all season long. It has a rich, deep purple foliage and a uniform compact habit, making it a standout as an ornamental in any garden or any vegetable in a container. Unlike many kales, this selection maintains its color and tidy bushy shape with shorter inner nodes, making it ideal for small spaces, as well as um, heat tolerance. Um, According to the trials, this was said to be bountiful, as the plants yielded twice the leaf weight of other red types of kale. Exceptionally tender, no bitterness, providing continuous harvest of greens from spring until frost. And they put a note on here that it's rare for a perfectly suited plant to be both for landscape and dinner. So with this bushy habit for the kale, it gets roughly 36 inches and spreads about 24 inches. And for harvest or days to harvest, it's 55 days for harvest from a transplant or a 70-day interval from sowing direct seeded. And roughly you would get about 100 leaves per plant for kale as its growth estimate. So one thing to note, this one does like the warmer soil temperatures. So this one was said to plant when soil temperatures was roughly 75 degrees for germination. Um, for a fall crop, um, as above, you would also plant this one in the garden from June to July to ensure that mature heads um, were in early enough before the early frost, or for the fall frost, excuse me. Um, and then from the judges, just a number of very um, good comments about the dark color, making it a standout, having that more bushy habit, and very tender leaves. Then for our next one, we have another hybrid, and this is a tomato, and it's called Bada Bing. And this is a large cherry, almost to the point of being a cocktail-sized tomato, that was said to have protection from septoria leaf spot, early blight, and late blight, helping to ensure the plant's having a healthy growth habit all year long. It's considered a early season tomato with an outstanding flavor, having a juicy and crack resistant. Um, the rough diameter of the almost cocktail sized tomatoes is about an inch and a half, and they're bright red. Despite being an indeterminate plant, Bada Bing is said to stay more manageable with only getting about 40 inches tall. This one was bred for its superior garden performance and robust disease resistance. Um, One of the judges made a comment that you're going to get more bang for your buck with this full, delicious tomato. So it's got an upright growth habit that's going to be indeterminate, roughly getting about 40 inches tall and spreading about 18 inches wide. And then, as I mentioned, having resistance to a number of different um, viruses, different nematodes, said to be resistant to fusarium wilt, verticillium wilt, late blight, septoria leaf blight or leaf spot, and early blight. Um, for this one, from days to harvest, it's about 65 days from transplant, said to give about 50 or more tomatoes per plant. And for this one, if you're going to start seeds, you want to start them inside about 4 to 6 weeks before the late frost, or the last frost, excuse me. And then plant them outside after the danger of frost has passed and the soil is warm. So typical for our Illinois environment. Um, Planting suggestions about 24 inches apart in 3 to 4 feet rows apart. And just some comments on here. It had a good meaty texture, a very unique shape, good harvest due to its large fruit size, and definitely gave you that bang for your buck an extended period of time with an exceptional appearance and a good flavor, with best of all, the disease resistant. All right, for our next one, we have another hybrid, which is winter butter lamp squash. And so this is a mini pumpkin-sized butternut squash that delivers both a whimsical charm and a good performance, making it perfect for the garden. So it's said to have a strong, healthy plant that has excellent resistance to powdery mildew, heat, and insect pressure. Exceptional early maturing variety with shorter vines. So it required less garden space than your traditional types. Produces an abundant amount of uniform 15 to 30 ounce squashes with an attractive kind of cream colored exterior, with that rich yellow squash that we're looking for on the inside. Um, the squash was said to offer a smooth, sweet, and buttery and nutty flavor with a good, superb storage ability so that you can store these for the winter. Um, excuse me. For those interested, this is in the Moschata species of winter squash. The plant itself gets about 12 inches tall with a spread of about 78 inches. The gourds themselves get roughly 1 to 2 pounds. With the resistances to cucumber mosaic virus as well. For sowing seeds directly outdoors, roughly 80 to 100 days for um, sowing the seeds outside, and then 85 to 90 days to harvest with growing them for transplant, good for both edible and decoration purposes. Um, have some heat tolerance built into them, get about 4 to 6 fruits per plant. And for the optimum growth temperature, um, between 60 and 95 degrees in a deep, fertile, well-drained, sandy loam or loam soil. The squash roots are highly adaptable, even in sandy or gravelly areas that lack water or nutrient retention, with higher yields still being achieved with the careful attention to irrigation and fertigation. If you did want to trellis these or have them as hanging squash, it's recommended to plant them in double rows with row spacings of approximately 13 feet and in row spacings of roughly 1 1/3 to 2 1/3 feet. Um, these squash are a strong feeder, so excessive nitrogen applications in the early stage can lead to overly vigorous growth, meaning that they can bolt and get leggy and have poor fruit set. So you want to make sure that you add your fertilizer at the correct time, and um, The optimum period for the fruit set to harvest is roughly 40 to 50 days. And then just some ending quotes from some of the judges. Excellent germination, good vigor, um, excellent resistance to powdery mildew, um, good flavor, smooth, nutty, and buttery, good heat resistance, good resistance to insect and disease pressures as well. Strong, healthy plants with an abundant fruit set. All right. So those were the vegetables that are available from All America Selections in 2026. So those are the ones that we would be seeing now at our local garden centers and nurseries, as well as you may have seen them in your seed catalogs as well. Now, I wanted to also include the ones from 2025, some that have had some experience with 2 years of growing under their belt. 1 year for the trial, and then last year they were available for the public. And so starting off, we had a basil called Piedmont, which was said to have exceptional downy mildew resistance, meaning you'd have healthier plants and weeks of extra harvest compared to other varieties. Um, Known for its disease quality, this vigorous basil forms dense, bushy plants with a strong aroma of that classic basil flavor that we know and all smell. It has a refined habit with shorter internodes, ensures easy management, and excellent post-harvest keeping quality. So that means once you've harvested it, it doesn't wilt right away. This is a basil that is said to thrive even in challenging conditions for its stress and heat tolerance abilities. So this one takes 30 days to harvest from transplant and then 60 to 75 days from seed. All right, our next one is a purple cauliflower, and Murasaki means purple in Japanese, which is a new addition to the Fiorito long-stemmed cauliflower series. And Fiorito is the Italian word for flower. So the name literally means purple flower. Known for its casual or its culinary and visual delight, with bright purple florets on long tender stems that offer a sweet, mild flavor that's easy to harvest compared to other varieties. This one was a heat-tolerant variety, which maintains its cooking through various methods of cooking, or maintains its good color through um, various methods of cooking, transforming its color to fuchsia when mixed with vinegar, or a rich golden brown color when it's sauteed and roasted. So either way you cook it, you're going to get different color variations, as well as you can just eat it raw. Um, the compact habit, early maturity, and its excellent field holding capacity makes it a rewarding choice for home gardeners. So when we talk about field holding capacity, that means that this one can be harvested, and while you're out in the garden in the heat, it's not going to break down or wilt as quickly as other varieties of cauliflower. This one has a 70 days to harvest from transplant. And our next one is the Konstance kohlrabi. And so this one was a 2025 edible award winner and was said to have a long harvest window for those of us who are kohlrabi fans. This purple kohlrabi has an improved, smoother skin, which has a more attractive, vibrant purple color. And because of that skin, um, it has that longer um, growth habit. From the skin, it also produces its leaf margins. Um, so this one was said to be good for growing in the spring or in the fall. It continued to produce crunchy bulbs that were more crack resistant and long less lasting compared to the closest marketable varieties that it was grown next to. And a bonus is that it has a sweet, crisp, peppery bulb um, that leaves a more highly flavored bulb when it's roasted or sautéed, and you can eat them when the leaves are young and tender as well. So you can eat both the leaves, the stems, and the bulb on this kohlrabi. The pepper that we had last year was called the Pick and Pop, and it was a yellow hybrid. And so um, the Pick and Pop um, was one that was said to be a snack-sized mini pepper with an extra sweet flavor with just the right of crunchiness and juiciness. The produce continuously produced on this moderate-sized plant with outstanding bacterial spot resistance and produced a prolific number of bright canary yellow uniform peppers as we see there in the slide. Um, a couple of the judges had different comments about Pick and Pop. And so one of the judges said, I'm not a fan of peppers. They're not my favorite. Um, but I love this variety. It was good to have for a snack or to eat as it was harvested out, just the right amount of sweet crunch and juiciness, along with its good uniform plant. Another said that the plant size isn't overwhelming, but substantial enough to keep up with the full amount of fruit. Um, Perfect canopy to protect against sun scald. Very easy to harvest, very good mature fruit, resistance to bacterial leaf spot. And many of the judges said that the trial exceeded their expectations when judged. It stayed compact and dense, and the fruit had a bright yellow-orange color that was uniform and abundant and matured very fast compared to its comparisons. This is one that I'm looking forward to growing this year, and that's the green lightning squash. And so um, this one was said to have a unique color, which was very eye-catching, a very nice gloss with a small seed cavity and a good eating quality. And so this one could either be used as a novel squash for ornamental purposes or um, be cooked and had a nice, robust flavor that stood up against many seasonings. It's a nice medium and light green rind, which has a glossy sheen attached to it. The small seed cavity on a smaller squash means that it's more delicious to eat fresh, and said that it did not have any downsides to it. So this would be considered a patty pan squash, 40 days to harvest from transplant, or 48 to 52 days from seed. Noted by the judges to have a very interesting bicolor, as well as being a prolific producer by many judges. Quick to produce, likely could plant a week or two later to avoid typical insects for the area. Although the plant did not experience as much devastation as other crops compared to this one. Excellent overall. Fruits were nice sized for eating and not oversized for an ornamental variety. We've got another squash, and this is our last All-America Selection winner for 2025, at least in the vegetable category. Again, there were more flowers for 2025 that were winners as well. But the thriller was said to have a psychedelic color pattern to add to your fall decor. Each of the dumpling squashes were roughly 1 to 2 pounds, having a shallow vertical ridge that would alternate between a variegated cream and green with a bright orange. A semi-bush plant that matures 75 to 80 days from planting. The fruit colors shift and change as they mature from early to late season color. It was said that both judges from the United States and Canada agree that Thriller is a unique and well-adapted, easy to grow squash. The entry plants were the greenest and the healthiest of the three, according to the judges. So when they compare them, they usually have two varieties of market comparables plus the variety that they're trialing. So this one was the greenest and healthiest. Their fruits had attractive shape, color between the yellow and the green. They roasted them, and this one had a pleasing flavor. Great appearance, great quality of the fruit. Small fruits, very cute, look like mini pumpkins. Best flavor and texture, and many taste testers went back for more. Said to have a strong squash smell with a rich flavor that surprised many of the judges. The entry had a great color early and late in the season, and the plant held well and wasn't too viney when it was put into the ground. Also, being powdery mildew resistant for better growth habit through the season. All right, so we're going to move on now to some just planting tips and reminders for this season of growing here in Illinois. So for some planting tips for Illinois in the summer, anticipate the weather. Um, so a couple years ago, when we had those 100-degree days up here in the north, this was lettuce that we had watered at the beginning of a program. And I took a picture maybe 5 minutes later, and this lettuce had started wilting already. So on days that you can predict the weather, and hopefully, knock on wood, you can predict it better than the weathermen sometimes. You want to water more often just to provide enough hydration for the plant. Use shade cloth to help cut down on heat and sunlight beating down on the plants for those varieties that are more heat intolerant than others. Um, Remember that hot weather produces more bolting and prolific bolting. So things like lettuce and basil will go to flower because they think because of the heat, it's reaching the end of their life. So they got to produce those flowers to produce the seed. When that happens, just remember to remove those flower stalks to keep them in their vegetative form, which you might have to do every day to every couple of days. Um, in days when we have high humidity, that's going to help our plants as the water concentration in the air and the water concentration in the plant is more even so that they don't transpire as much water as they normally would on a hot, dry day. Take advantage of your landscape. So if you have parts of your landscape that have a micro environment or provide a little bit more shade, remember to put some of your more shade tolerant or heat intolerant plants in those pockets. And then also plant your fall crops. So usually end of July through early September is the recommended date from our third slide, I think it was, on our very hardy crops that like being planted for fall. And so moving us into our fall planting tips, remember as the water or as the temperature goes down, as the heat goes down, you'll have to reduce your watering because you won't have to be watering 1 to 2 times a day, depending on location, time, and weather. That planting for fall crops produces sweeter produce in the fall because if you think of a bell curve for our weather, we get coolest and start warming up to our hottest point. Usually this is when we plant our fall crops in July, August, and beginning of September when we start going down on that curve. And then as that temperature goes down, our plants are having a more easy time, less stressful time, which means that they're able to produce more of that flavor to produce those sweeter vegetables for us. When we start looking at cleaning up towards the fall, remember that leaf mulch or helps with organic matter and protects our pollinators over winter. So push those leaves into your landscape to protect your plants. Put those in your garden beds. Remember not to remove those old flower stalks as they can be a overwintering place for some of our pollinator friends. And then, as we started off talking about with frost dates, remember your frost dates, keep an eye on the weather. As we've seen in the shift for the fall one, we got a couple of extra days added on there to about an extra week. And that's our last potential frost. We could still get that early frost that we might get in October. So keep an eye on the weather. And then remember to till under or remove your annuals to help clean up your landscape. And compost those if possible for next year's nutrients. So, a little bit of review. So, we talked about the growing zones of Illinois and talking about that for every 250 miles that you go south in Illinois, your growing season gains a week in the spring and a week in the fall. So, compared to the north, our friends in the central have a extra 2 weeks, and our friends in the south have those extra 4 weeks, giving them an extra month to plant ahead. We reviewed planting times for each of our groups of crops. Now, remember, we talked about frost tolerance for many of our crops because that's what we tend to focus on. But you also want to think about those crops that have heat resistance as well if you have an open, sunny spot in your garden that really heats up. Talked about the new All-America selections for 2025 and 2026. Remember that this is just a introduction to some of those new crops. There are plenty of others that are in your seed catalogs that we all look forward to starting to receive in that January, February timeframe and thumbing through. Um, and talk to your local nurseryman, nurserywoman, garden center person, as they may have seen some of these new crops come in, or usually if they are a smaller grower, um, they can order some of these new things as well. And then we finished by talking about our plant tips for Illinois. Reminder that if you want to review this recording or past recordings for the Four Seasons webinar series, they're available on YouTube at go.illinois.edu /Four Seasons recordings, as well as on our University of Illinois Horticulture YouTube channel are all of the videos from our horticulture team across all of our programs that we do, including Good Growing, and others around the state. I'm going to pause here on this slide that we do have a brief survey about today's presentation, just like all of our others. So if you want to scan this QR code with your mobile phone, it'll take you to the survey. I do appreciate your feedback, as I will use this to influence not only my presentation, but will ask for suggestions for other Four Seasons topics that you're interested in. If you do not have a mobile phone, you can go to go.illinois.edu /veggie-visions, and that will bring up the survey for you as well.